What if everything they criticized you for was actually the proof of your rarest gift? What if being too much wasn't a flaw but a calling? What if the very traits that made you feel like an outsider were signs that your soul came here carrying something extraordinary? Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But let me ask you something. What if who you truly are doesn't fit in? There is a kind of personality that doesn't settle. It doesn't conform. It questions too much, feels too deeply, senses too sharply. And society doesn't know what to do with it, so it tries to label it, dismiss it, suppress it. You might have heard it all before. You're overreacting. You're too sensitive. You think too much. And in quiet moments you may have wondered if they were right, if maybe there was something wrong with you. But I'm here to tell you, that doubt, that pain, that restlessness that never quite left you, it's not a defect, it's evidence of depth. It's a signal that you carry within you a rare psychological architecture that Carl Jung called differentiated consciousness, a type of awareness most people never touch in a lifetime. And here's the paradox that Jung understood so well. The more psychologically advanced a person becomes, the lonelier they feel. Because the world doesn't always recognize psychological rarity, it only notices difference, and difference, when it's not understood, is often punished. But now you're here, not by accident, not by coincidence, but because somewhere in you, a deeper self is waking up. A part of you that is tired of playing small. A part that no longer wants to apologize for its insight, its intuition, its hunger for meaning. You may not know it yet, but your sensitivity is a superpower. Your solitude is a sanctuary. Your intensity is sacred. And in this journey we're about to take together, I'll show you exactly why Jung believed that people like you are not only rare, but absolutely essential to the evolution of human consciousness. So stay with me, because once you understand what these signs truly mean, you'll never see yourself the same way again. We will start with the first sign. You feel emotions at a depth others can't understand. There's a kind of silence you've grown used to, not the quiet of peace, but the silence that follows when someone tells you you're too much, too emotional, too intense, too sensitive. But what they don't know, what they can't begin to imagine, is that you're not just reacting to the surface. You're resonating with something deeper, something they can't see, but you feel like an echo through your bones. Carl Jung understood this. He saw that for some rare individuals, emotions don't just pass through like weather. They move like tides. They stir the unconscious. They activate what he called affect-toned complexes, psychological patterns loaded with emotion, often originating from the deeper realms of the psyche. And here's the truth no one ever told you. You're not overreacting. You're perceiving. You feel when someone's hurting, even if they don't say a word. You sense the disconnect between a smile and the truth behind their eyes. You pick up what others suppress, because your psyche is tuned like an instrument to the frequencies most people have long forgotten how to hear. But because others don't feel this way, they pathologize it. They call it sensitivity. They say you should be tougher, that you take things too personally. But what they don't understand is that your emotions are not weakness. They're a compass. They're radar. They're truth. Truth moving through the body before the mind can catch up. Jung warned of what happens when people like you try to suppress this depth. When you force yourself to be normal, to match the emotional flatline of the world around you, your inner world fractures. You begin to split between the part of you that feels everything and the part that pretends it doesn't. And that split, it doesn't protect you. It makes you sick. It turns your gift into confusion, your wisdom into shame. But what if this wasn't a flaw to fix? What if this was your superpower? Jung believed the wound is where the light enters, and your depth, your capacity to feel, to resonate, to carry the unspoken, that is the wound, but it is also the key to healing, the key to knowing, the key to becoming fully alive in a world that's forgotten how to feel. So the next time someone tells you you're too much, smile, because what they really mean is that they're not ready to feel, not ready to face, not ready to see what you see, but you are. And that makes you rare, and that makes you necessary. Sign number 2. You relentlessly question the world and yourself. You've never been able to accept things just because that's the way they are. From an early age, something in you resisted the script. While others memorized their lines, you kept stepping off stage, looking behind the curtain, asking who wrote the play, and wondering why no one else seemed to mind how fake it all felt. It wasn't rebellion, it was recognition. A quiet, persistent knowing that what's handed down isn't always true, and what's popular isn't always real. Carl Jung called this the transcendent function, the part of the psyche that seeks wholeness by uniting opposites, by questioning the rigid forms of inherited belief and calling forth what lies hidden beneath the surface. You don't just ask what is, you ask why. Why do we follow rules that suffocate our spirit? Why do people build lives that look good on the outside but feel hollow within? Why do we ignore what aches inside us just to fit into a world that has no idea who we are? You question everything, not to be difficult but to be honest, because surface explanations feel like betrayal to the part of you that craves truth like oxygen. And yet, this honesty can cost you, because the moment you start pulling at the threads, people get uncomfortable. Your questions threaten their scaffolding. Your search for meaning exposes the meaninglessness they've spent their lives justifying. They call you negative, critical, or even too deep. But Jung knew this for what it is, a form of psychological courage, a refusal to numb yourself into unconsciousness. You can't go back to sleep. You can't unsee what you've seen, and you wouldn't want to, because in this relentless questioning, something sacred awakens. You begin to sense the shape of your own soul. You stop playing roles that don't fit. You begin carving out a life that aligns with who you really are, not who you were told to be. But yes, it can be isolating. Truth-telling always is. Because when you live in a world addicted to comfort, clarity becomes a threat. And when you choose depth over denial, you risk standing alone. Yet that's the paradox of awakening. The more authentic you become, the fewer people will truly understand you, but the more magnetic you become to those who do. So keep asking, keep questioning, keep pulling the thread, because at the end of that unraveling, you won't find ruin, you'll find freedom. Sign number 3. You developed independence as a form of psychological survival. At some point, you realized the applause wasn't real, that no matter how much you gave, how well you performed, how perfectly you conformed, it was never enough. You bent yourself to fit into spaces that never felt like home. You softened your voice. You wore the mask. You played the part. But deep down, you knew you were vanishing. And the only way to come back to life was to stop needing them to see you. So you let go. Not because you stopped caring, but because you were tired of begging for crumbs of validation from people who only ever loved the version of you that kept them comfortable. Carl Jung called this individuation, the sacred, often painful process of becoming your true self. It's not rebellion. It's not isolation. It's metamorphosis. You learned to build your sense of self from the inside out. You stopped chasing approval. You stopped performing. You stopped mistaking attention for love. And in that stillness, where everything familiar had fallen away, you found something far more powerful than praise. Integrity. The kind that isn't loud, the kind that doesn't seek an audience, the kind that stands quietly in its own knowing. You began making decisions not out of fear of rejection, but from alignment with your deepest truth. And yes, some people couldn't come with you. Some called you cold, distant, too independent. But what they don't understand is that your independence isn't a wall, it's a sanctuary, a space you had to build brick by brick after tearing down the scaffolding of a false self. Jung warned that when the soul is ignored long enough, it rebels. And your rebellion? It wasn't loud or violent. It was sacred. It was choosing authenticity over belonging, solitude over self-betrayal, depth over decorum. And now you stand, not above others, but rooted in something they may not yet understand, a life that no longer needs permission to be true. But here's the thing. This grounded independence, this inner quiet, it's not the end of the journey, because the deeper you go within, the more sensitive you become to what's happening around you. And that leads us straight to the next sign. A gift so powerful it can feel like a curse unless you learn how to protect it. Sign number 4. You possess a near supernatural intuition that can feel like a burden. You don't just observe people, you read them. Before they speak, before they explain, before they confess, you already know. Something in you catches it. The tension behind the smile, the fear in their silence, the story between their words. It's not that you're guessing. It's not even that you're particularly smart. It's something deeper, older, wired into the very fabric of your nervous system. Carl Jung called this intuition, perception via the unconscious. And when this gift is developed, it becomes almost prophetic. You walk into rooms and feel things before they happen. You sense the shifts in energy that others dismiss. You detect what people don't even realize they're carrying. But while this intuition can be sacred, it's not always easy. Because when you see deeply, you also feel responsible. You become the emotional anchor, the unofficial therapist, the one who knows what everyone else refuses to say out loud. You hold the unspoken weight. You keep the balance. You adjust yourself to make space for the pain no one else wants to name. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you disappear. Your needs fade into the background, your energy drains, your body grows tired. Not from labor, but from carrying invisible storms. Jung warned of this trap, the archetype of the wounded healer, the one who heals others while neglecting themselves, the one who sacrifices presence for peace, who says, "I'm fine," because no one else can afford for them to not be. But here's the truth. Your gift is not meant to be a cage. You were not born to carry everyone else's emotions. You were born to feel, yes, but also to discern. To choose when to engage, to choose when to retreat, to choose when a burden is not yours to bear. This is what Jung called psychological boundaries, an inner structure that allows deep feelers to remain whole in a chaotic world. Because when you protect your gift, it doesn't shrink, it sharpens. Your intuition becomes guidance, not exhaustion. Your empathy becomes power, not depletion. Your presence becomes medicine, not martyrdom. And as you begin to live this way, something miraculous happens. You stop rescuing, you stop over-explaining. You stop absorbing what was never meant to live inside you. You begin to trust that others are capable of facing their own darkness, and you begin to trust that your own light is worth preserving, which leads you to the next truth. Because once you've seen through illusion, once you've tasted authenticity, you can't return to the life everyone else calls normal. And that realization changes everything. Sign number 5. You choose meaning over social acceptance. There comes a moment, sometimes quiet, sometimes catastrophic, when you realize the applause no longer satisfies. The trophies feel hollow. The roles you once played so well begin to suffocate. You look around and wonder, is this it? Is this what I was told to chase? Approval, status, smiles that don't reach the soul. For someone like you, the answer is no. And not because you're difficult, not because you're rebellious, but because your soul was never wired to be satisfied with the surface. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And for those with rare personalities, that privilege comes with a cost. You can't fake it. You can't pretend that meaningless conversations count as connection. You can't keep smiling through jobs, relationships, or rituals that don't nourish you. Your spirit revolts. Your body whispers through exhaustion, through anxiety, through that aching emptiness no amount of praise can touch. Jung called this neurosis, not as an illness, but as a signal, a protest from the soul, a cry from the unconscious saying, "This is not who you are. This is not why you're here." You begin to crave something deeper, something real, not the illusion of success, but the integrity of a meaningful life. But here's the paradox. The more you align with meaning, the more you may find yourself misaligned with society, because the world rewards conformity. And you've outgrown pretending. You're no longer willing to betray your truth to keep the peace. You're no longer available for conversations that cost your soul. You'd rather walk alone in integrity than be celebrated in inauthenticity. And this changes everything. Because once you stop seeking permission, you start living with intention. Your values sharpen, your vision deepens, your circle transforms. Some people will fall away, those who were only drawn to your mask, but others will arrive, drawn to your essence. You begin to live not from fear, but from alignment, not from image, but from essence, not from shoulds, but from truth. And that truth will cost you, but it will give you everything worth having. Still, as you walk this path, choosing depth, choosing truth, you'll notice something even more painful. You'll begin to outgrow the very world you once called home, and that too is part of the journey. Sign number 6. You outgrow relationships and environments. You once belonged to one day, without warning, something you once loved starts to feel too small. The friendship that once felt like home begins to echo with distance. The job that once gave you purpose now weighs like a costume. The city lights that once dazzled start to blind. And you can't explain it, not logically, not neatly. But something inside you has shifted, and you can no longer pretend it hasn't. Carl Jung called this the process of psychological death and rebirth, a quiet, sacred unraveling that happens not because we're broken, but because we're finally becoming whole. You're not abandoning people, you're not betraying your roots, you're simply evolving, and evolution by nature disrupts what no longer resonates. This is the tragedy no one warns you about. To become your true self, you will have to leave behind the versions of you that others depended on. It's not cruelty, it's necessity. Jung understood this as the price of individuation. To truly live, you must die to what is false. The roles you performed to be loved, the masks you wore to feel safe, the beliefs you inherited that now feel like cages. And so, the shedding begins. First, it feels like grief. You miss the people who no longer understand you. You long for the comfort of belonging, even if it meant betraying yourself. Then, it feels like fear. Who are you without the old identity? Who will stay? Will anyone? And then, if you stay with it, if you don't run back to the familiar out of loneliness, something miraculous happens. You begin to meet people who don't want your performance, they want your presence. People who recognize your frequency because they've walked through fire too. People who don't need you to shrink, explain, or translate your soul into palatable pieces. These connections aren't loud. They don't come in numbers, but they arrive like mirrors, showing you who you've become by simply refusing to abandon yourself. And in this new space, you don't have to apologize for your evolution, because you're no longer built for small talk, for shallow love, for environments that celebrate the mask and reject the mirror. You're built for depth, for truth, for resonance. And as your inner world becomes more aligned, your outer world will rise to meet it. But there's one more gift that comes with this shedding, a quality that cannot be faked, taught, or manufactured. Something that others begin to feel the moment you enter a room. Sign number 7. You offer a depth of presence that transforms others. You don't speak to impress. You don't rush to respond. You listen, truly listen, in a world that has forgotten how. People feel it. They lean in. They exhale in your presence without knowing why. Because when they're around you, something ancient stirs. They feel seen. Carl Jung once said, The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. And you are the catalyst. You don't offer advice from the surface. You offer space, a space where masks fall away, where confusion finds clarity, where silence becomes sacred. You are what Jung called a natural psychological holding container, a soul that holds others not by fixing them, but by allowing them to unfold. In your presence, people remember who they are, not the version they pretend to be, but the one they abandoned to survive. You don't need to solve them. You simply witness, and in that witnessing, healing begins. But here's the danger. This depth can become a double-edged sword. Because when you're the one holding everyone else, who holds you? When your strength becomes invisible, when your empathy becomes expected, when your silence is mistaken for stability, you begin to erode. Jung identified this as the helper's shadow, the unconscious pattern where the healer forgets to heal themselves, where the listener forgets to speak, where the anchor begins to sink. You begin to believe your worth lies in what you give, and you stop remembering that you are also allowed to receive. You say, "I'm fine," but inside, you ache for someone to see you without needing anything from you. This is why boundaries aren't just necessary, they're sacred, because not everyone deserves access to your depth. Not everyone is capable of holding what you offer, and not everyone has earned the right to sit at the altar of your presence. So the work becomes this: to discern, to offer without emptying, to love without losing, to be open without becoming available to everyone. Because when you learn to protect your light, it doesn't dim, it shines more clearly. And it draws toward you those who are truly meant to walk beside you, not just lean on you. But even as you grow in this wisdom, as your presence becomes more refined, there is still something stirring within, a whisper that refuses to be ignored, a sense that you're not just here to feel, to heal, or to witness. You're here for something greater. Sign number 8, you feel a larger purpose. You can't yet name. It's been with you for as long as you can remember, that quiet ache, that restless knowing, that sense that you were meant for something more, something deeper than the ordinary, more enduring than success, more sacred than recognition. But no one taught you how to name it. So for years, you tried to silence it, tried to live a normal life, tried to follow the script, and still, it pulsed beneath everything. The call. Carl Jung called this the transcendent function, the psyche's longing to unify all parts of the self, to become whole, to fulfill a purpose not defined by society, but encoded in the soul. This is not ambition. This is not ego. This is the emergence of something ancient and archetypal. What Jung described as an archetypal calling, a mission that bridges the unconscious and conscious realms of human experience. You feel it when you're alone at night, when the noise fades and the truth rises. You feel it in the tension between who you are and who you're becoming. You feel it in the way your heart aches for something you've never touched, but somehow deeply remember. This is not delusion, it's destiny. But here's the paradox. The clearer this purpose becomes, the more humble you must be. Jung warned about inflation, the tendency to mistake divine calling for superiority, to believe we are chosen above others rather than for others. So the path is not upward, but inward. The work is not to rise, but to deepen, to descend into the shadow, to confront the parts of ourselves that still resist truth, to integrate, to become. Because only a soul that has met its own darkness can truly carry the light. You are not here to fix the world. You are not here to save anyone. You are here to awaken. And in doing so, you give others silent permission to do the same. This is your why, not a job, not a role, but a way of being, a way of seeing, a way of walking through the world that leaves it just a little more conscious than you found it. And yes, it can feel lonely. Yes, it can feel invisible. Yes, you will be misunderstood. But you are not lost. You are not too much. You are not broken. You are part of what Jung called the leading edge of human consciousness. You are a bridge, a mirror, a reminder, and your very existence is the medicine. If you saw yourself in these signs, don't rush to label yourself as too much. You're not a malfunction in the system. You're a soul reacting to a world steeped in collective unconsciousness. Your emotional depth is not a burden. It's a compass. When you feel things deeply, it doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're attuned to a level of reality most people have been conditioned to ignore. This sensitivity is a gift if you learn to set boundaries and stop absorbing the weight of others like an emotional sponge. When you question everything, when you refuse to accept shallow answers, understand that you're not cynical, you're psychologically honest. You're living awake in a world that prefers sleep. Your curiosity is not a flaw, it's a flame. Keep tending it. If you feel like you're outgrowing the spaces and people that once felt like home, don't panic. You're not abandoning them. You're becoming yourself. Old environments cannot nourish an evolving self. Let the grief of outgrowing be the soil where new, deeper connections can bloom. Your presence is rare, but remember, no one can be present for others if they don't know how to return to themselves. Learn to care for your own inner world the way you once held everyone else's. You can't pour from an empty cup, no matter how sincere your love is. And if you feel called to something greater, something unnamed but undeniable, don't dismiss it. Jung believed that when we ignore the soul's calling, it doesn't disappear. It mutates into psychological distress. You don't need to know the full path right now. Just be honest about the pull you feel, and the steps will appear as you move. The world doesn't need more people who conform. It needs more people who remember how to feel deeply, question bravely, live authentically. If you are one of them, your life isn't meant to blend in. It's meant to ignite something, not just in yourself, but in others. This is not a burden. This is your sacred task. Your inner flame, once protected, can light the path for those still walking in the dark. If this resonated with your soul, like, share, and subscribe for more Jung-inspired journeys into the depths of the self. This channel is a sanctuary for the rare, the deep, and the awakening. Your presence here means everything, and your voice, your growth, is always welcome.